All right, let's get started.
Do you want to put our slide up?
All right.
One slide.
Oh,
Slide.
oh yeah. Can we switch the?
The slide. They're in there changing it.
We having fun?
Yep.
Woo! Yeah.
Saturday, 2:15. How's the energy?
Out there, did you get good snacks?
All right. Welcome to our third and final panel of the day. I'm Erica Phillips. I was for 3 years an economic development reporter at the Connecticut Mirror. Hey. I recently became an editor there, but I still care very much about the economic development ecosystem here in Connecticut. So that is why I'm here. I hope that you've all been learning and absorbing all the great stuff here today, not to mention trying all the food. I had like 3 lunches out there, and it was excellent. So after this panel, we'll be having our pitch competition, which is the big part of the big Connecticut food event, so you should definitely stick around for that. But first, we're going to talk to a bunch of very cool people about the work that they're doing to provide support for emerging food and beverage brands. Their organizations are super helpful and offer a wealth of resources, services, and networks for startups. So let's hear more. I'm going to have each guest introduce themselves. We have Jen, Sarah, Jennifer, and Caitlin. So we'll just start here from the left. Hi, Jen.
Hi. I'm the interloper. I'm from Massachusetts. I apologize in advance. I know, it's fine. So I'm Jen Faigel. I am the executive director and a co-founder of Commonwealth Kitchen. As we like to say, food is our passion, equity is our mission. We are based in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston, and our focus is on how do we help women, immigrants, and people of color start and build food businesses. And we run 4 core programs: a shared kitchen, business education and training, market access, retail, wholesale, institutions, all of the above. And we are a co-packer. So a lot of our work is also helping to take our brands and how do we help scale them into larger markets. Happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming down from Boston, Jen. We really appreciate it. So my name is Sarah Miller. I'm the executive director of CitySeed. Also a member of the New Haven Board of Alders. I wear both hats. CitySeed runs all the farmers markets in New Haven. We had one this morning, our indoor winter market, which was hopping this morning. If you're from New Haven, you know how great it is. We also have a small, early stage food business incubation program with a commercial kitchen run by my colleague, Cara Santino, who's here. And we also have Sanctuary Kitchen, which is a social enterprise run by immigrant and refugee chefs. So many people probably have catering from Sanctuary Kitchen. So those are all the things that we do. We also have a new building in Fairhaven, which is a former factory that we're at the beginning stages of transforming into a shared use commercial kitchen space beyond the capacity that we have now. And Commonwealth is one of our models. So we're happy to be here in partnership with you and to learn from you as well as we move through the process. So thanks for having us.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Matthew. I'm the executive director of the Connecticut Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which is housed at the University of Connecticut. In addition, I'm an entrepreneur, a consultant. I've worked with startups across Connecticut and helped them to launch. I've also launched the UConn Brewing Innovation Program, so to help tie students into the brewing space here in Connecticut. I look forward to sharing more about what all of these programs offer to entrepreneurs in Connecticut.
Thanks. Nice to be here with all of you. My name is Caitlin Taylor. I also feel a little bit like an interloper here. I am from Connecticut, but I'm actually a farmer and an architect. So I am one of the co-founders of Four Root Farm in East Haddam, Connecticut, which is a longtime vendor at the CitySeed markets for over a decade, and proud to be part of the farming community that CitySeed has fostered. But in addition to being a founder of a farm, I'm also an architect. And in my work in the sort of food systems design and architecture world, I'm really focused on the built stuff of our food system, the literal built infrastructure that it's going to take for us to catalyze a truly transformative food system that can support a bioregional economy. So as part of that work, I'm the founder of a relatively new and emerging real estate and design studio that I've created to specifically foster, catalyze, finance, design, and develop pieces of physical built infrastructure for our regional food system. And I'm excited to bring that perspective to the conversation today.
Excellent. As you can see, tons of helpful folks here. So let's get into the questions. We heard a little bit of tease of each of what your organizations offer, but let's really dive in. And we'll start, the first question we'll start with Sarah and go down and come back. What are common types of support that emerging food brands need in their early stages, and how does your organization provide those resources?
Sure. So we have a food business accelerator, which is one of the cornerstones of our incubation work. So it's a 12-week accelerator for early stage food businesses. Many of the brands and products you see outside went through that program. And the other really important piece is the kitchen. So we run the kitchen at the Dixwell Q House, and people can rent it at a very low rate to develop their products. We also provide wraparound support services for businesses, a lot of help with licensing and permitting, especially in the very early stages, and then a lot of handoff to partners to develop their business further or to look for financing, all of that. So really wraparound support with the kitchen is a very important piece. But what we've seen through the years is just how limited the kitchen space that we have here in New Haven is, and the need to really expand that.
So the first part of the question was, what does early stage food entrepreneurs need? And I think in an ideal world, if a food entrepreneur comes to us just at the ideation stage and they say, here's my crazy idea, how do I take it to market? That's really our sweet spot, is helping them to identify their customers and think through what value they're providing. And if you heard the panel before, they're talking about new and emerging trends that you're seeing in a variety of different industries, like no alcoholic or low alcoholic beverages, for example. So us being really well connected in the space, we're helping these entrepreneurs think about what's the opportunity now, what's the opportunity in 2 to 3 years when you're more likely to get on the shelves or in the hands of your customers, and helping them to think in advance. We know in a perfect world that doesn't happen that way, right? So a lot of the entrepreneurs have a product that they've started or they've been sharing with friends and family that they say, you need to get this in the hands of other people. This is amazing. And we help them to take a step back to understand if there's more of an interest rather than just like the local concept. But if you were to scale, what does that look like? So we have over 14 programs that I run in my center. We have a startup accelerator, but we really say, what does this look like? Your cost of goods sold now, but what does it look like at scale? So we dive in mostly on the business components of it, and then connecting out to all of the other aspects that really take a product from an idea into the market.
Again, acknowledging that I come at this from a slightly different perspective, I think that probably everyone at this event today has experienced in one way or another a gap in physical infrastructural spaces that food entrepreneurs need in order to bring their products to realization. And so a lot of my work operates between the scale of physical buildings, like identifying the spatial requirements and infrastructural requirements for physical buildings that can enable, efficient scaling and collaboration between different businesses, and, thinking creatively about operational models as they relate to the physical infrastructure of spaces at one end of the scale. And at the other end of the scale, really looking at our region holistically, our state here in Connecticut, and then even more broadly than that, the Northeast, as a bioregion, understanding how we all together can collaborate on identifying gaps in infrastructure by looking like literally at a map of the Northeast and identifying where those gaps are and helping to fill them. So there's been a lot of talk over the years, obviously, of like infrastructural asset mapping as this need. And I think that there have been some very successful stabs at that and some less successful attempts, but we're really trying to think creatively about that at this stage as we understand the relationship between that bioregional, infrastructural map and the actual physical built spaces that these young businesses need in order to operate and scale.
Fascinating.
So first of all, let me say, I grew up in New Haven and I graduated from Amity High School. So I just want to say I do have some local roots. Thank you very much. Right. Exactly. Anyway, sorry. Oh, well, you haven't met me yet, so wait. Or you're just meeting me, so we'll see how this goes. Anyway. So Commonwealth Kitchen, we started with what we thought was a pretty simple premise, which is that the food business offers tremendous opportunity from people, whatever walk of life, English language, criminal record, whatever your experience is, you actually can start and build a food business and be successful. And we know that small business is actually one of the most powerful ways for people to build wealth. And so if we actually care about the idea that people can build wealth, which is really important for economic and social mobility, then business ownership, and in our case, food business ownership, is a really important part of that strategy. Having said that, anybody who runs a food business knows it's a terrible business. It's really hard, right? And so the first thing we try to do is to convince people not to do it because it's really hard. But if you're going to do it, then we see our work as being strategic, values-aligned, trusted partners working with our businesses along their journey. That what business owners need is episodic. They need different things at different points in their process. That I have yet to see a business come in that the first concept that they came in with is what they did a year later, if they're still in business a year later. That it changes. And so what we have noticed in our work, I've been doing this for 10 years now, which is amazing to think, is that what we need to do is meet business owners where they are and really think about this human-centered design idea. What do you need where you are? What's the barrier that's in your way? How do we support you in that way? But really to empower what you're doing. And so we started, again, with the idea of a shared kitchen. Oh, well, the biggest problem for anybody who wants to start a food business is the cost of the kitchen. So if we provide a kitchen and charge by the hour, we describe it like a gym membership for food businesses. Oh, well, you'll be able to start your business. You'll try it out. You'll either make it because you see where the opportunity is, or the market will tell you that there's not a need for that, and you'll be on your way, but you won't lose your shirt doing it. And when we started the kitchen, what we immediately saw was, in fact, the kitchen was in many ways the easiest part of the business. That understanding permit, license, insurance, market segmentation, if you're in a retail pack versus in a food institutional pack, if you're a food truck versus a caterer versus a baker versus a product company, everything you need looks different over time. And that if we were going to meet our North Star, which is building businesses, then we had to figure out how to support you in that journey. And so that's really where our model has shifted over time to add lots of programming. And so the education and training, and a big part of our work is things like market access, where we are literally building relationships with partners to make it easier for our businesses to get a damn return phone call. Because again, we all understand the challenge of what it means to be a small business and an independent, and the amount of time that you don't have to do all those phone calls and everything else. But we also know that structural racism is real no matter what is happening in our world these days. Amen, right? And look, white girl running an organization that our mission says we are about racial, social, and economic justice. My responsibility is that I have privilege and I have to find ways to use my privilege to make that opportunity available. Right? So what does that look like? It looks like things like building strategic partnerships with MIT, where we get our businesses to be preferred caterers at MIT. It looks like us building relationships with the public schools to get our member products and their sauces and other things into those public schools, right? So finding ways to create opportunity for our businesses that just give them a chance, because given a chance, they're going to knock it out the park. But they have to be given the chance.
Just pointing out a little bit of meta here that we were talking about businesses coming in with their first idea a year from now. It's not quite going to be the same idea. Similarly with the Commonwealth Kitchen, it sounds like you had to shift, and it's all good. Learn and develop. So let's talk about that next phase, scaling up a business. This is when I wrote about food entrepreneurs a year ago, this was sort of the thing that I honed in on. It was you got a great product, you start selling it, but oh my gosh, there's this huge next leap to getting it produced at scale and really starting to distribute. So, Jennifer, let's start with you. How can organizations like yours help food entrepreneurs navigate the complexities of scaling their business from a small operation to a more established player?
Yeah, and I think that's what our sweet spot is. It really is at businesses at scale. And you met Denise earlier, who is with the Small Business Development Center. We work with that team to help food entrepreneurs that want to be more local and don't want to scale, which is absolutely fine. We work with businesses to understand what is their goal at the end of this. Are they trying to create a business that they are able to pass down to their kids? They want it to be local. They want it to be a passion piece they're giving back to their community. Whatever that thing is, we want them to find that and understand it. But if they want to sell their business in 5 years, that's an entirely different story too, right? They want to be acquired. Then they might go and get some venture financing. If they're not planning on doing that, we suggest bootstrapping as far and as long as they possibly can, which changes the business model and the plan for scale. So we talk a lot about how do they take their initial concept. It's not hard to go from $0 to maybe 10, 20,000 by selling at local fairs and retail stores and other things, but it's going to that, 100,000, 200,000. And as we just heard in the last panel, $1 million to be able to get a round of funding to be able to scale. That's where a lot of the challenges and the roadblocks get hit. And I know we're going to talk later in the panel about what resources are available in the state and how we can leverage that. But I think that's the part of what we do is really, if we can't help you in my center, we know a lot of different people that we can pass the entrepreneur along to. So that's really important to us, is really building that network and the connections and learning from everybody that's around us, trying to push for the support of the entrepreneurs here in Connecticut and beyond. So that's, my answer.
I'm going to have you define bootstrapping for us.
Yeah, so it's taking your own money or reinvesting revenue and not incurring any, take of equity, let's say, in your business, right? And it depends on how you define whether or not you use debt financing or other rounds of equity raise. Like when you think about bootstrapping, I think it's just reinvesting revenue. But there's a lot of really great grant programs that are non-dilutive in the funding. But that's the definition we use. So don't take money from someone that's going to take equity of your business.
Caitlin, tell me about scaling kind of from your viewpoint, the infrastructure and so on.
Yeah, I think that it's important when we're asking and talking about scale to understand and try to wrap our arms a little bit more specifically around what a truly bioregional economy will look like and understand scale from that perspective. We have some really good examples of what that means, but we do also have an industrial globalized food system today that gives us a lot of very misleading examples of what a scaled food business can and should look like. So I think from the perspective of designing our regional food system, we need to be thinking about designing our supply chains and understanding their capacities and flows and throughputs based on our region. Where are population centers? How big are they? How far apart are they from each other? Where are the road networks and the rail lines? And how are we actually literally mapping the physical assets and resources of our region to understand what the right scale for our regional food economy is? And that's the sort of research-focused direction from which I'm coming at some of this work recently.
It's really neat to think about it in that way, in that regional way. Jen?
Yeah, and so just to build on what Caitlin said, so you heard me say that Commonwealth Kitchen, in addition to running a shared kitchen, we're also a co-packer. We started doing that because what we saw was a gap in the infrastructure and a gap in the marketplace. So anybody who is working as an artisan, making the food by yourself and doing it largely by hand and trying to figure out how to go faster and use lots of part-time labor and get those folks to be able to work at the right speed and do exactly what you needed them to do every time and meet all the food safety requirements and everything else, really, really hard. And so from an artisan, the next step is either you're building out your own factory, who's got the money to do that and all the infrastructure required to that, or you're going to outsource to a traditional co-packer. What we have seen in the co-packing world is that they do one thing, they do it really well, and that's what they do. We work with a lot of businesses that are doing really different kinds of products. And the co-packers don't want to change what they do. And so a simple example of this is we had a business doing fresh salsa using local tomatoes. We tried multiple co-packers that would work with her, and none of them would work with fresh local tomatoes. They all used frozen tomatoes. Why? Because they get consistency every time. The viscosity, the sweetness, everything about it. So our business could not get her product made by the co-packers that were around. 1. 2, the co-packer said, the minimum that I'll do it for is about 3 times what you can afford, and you have to pay in advance. 3, she had a fresh product. So not only was it something that she'd have to do all in advance, get all of it done, she wasn't going to be able to sell it all. So for her, this was a business that was stuck. She's an artisan making it herself, and let me say, at this point in probably 200 stores with distribution and in places like Whole Foods. So just let's set the understanding of what it takes to scale and the size you have to scale in the world of CPG. So she's in this place where she will never get bigger because she doesn't have the money. The co-packers aren't going to take her on. And so we had to look at ourselves and say, well, how do we fix the problem? And said, well, isn't the problem one of infrastructure of a co-packer that's willing to work in a smaller scale and be able to be nimble? And essentially all we're doing is we're aggregating the labor to say we will make the salsa on Monday and the hummus on Tuesdays and the cookies on Wednesdays. That was the thinking behind what we were doing. And so when we started doing this co-packing about 7 years ago, we thought we would only be working for these small brands and we could be nimble and we could be that missing middle. And what we learned was, holy God, there's a reason that nobody does this kind of co-packing. It's really hard. All the regulatory requirements and everything else are really hard. But what we also saw was that all the buyers were all of a sudden willing to work with our businesses. Because they look to us for the food safety. They look to us for insurance. They look to us for the packaging and anything else. Or if they all get nervous, what if it gets really big and they can't keep up? So we have businesses now that are in Whole Foods and TJ Maxx, but they're also in Harvard and MIT and Northeastern and lots of other places. Why? Because they're looking to us to do that. The thing we didn't understand that would happen, and I can talk about this afterwards if people want to know, but to Caitlin's comment about the food system and the structure, was that by having this manufacturing capacity and this opportunity to connect to buyers, we also could connect to farmers. So in addition to the work we do for our small businesses, we actually work with a ton of farmers where we are processing surplus for them in season. Sometimes it's going back to them to sell at their farm stands, but in other cases, the simple example that I'll give is we worked last year to purchase about 50 tons of surplus tomatoes from Massachusetts farms. 50 tons is the equivalent of about 8 school buses, so think about how much tomato that is. This all would have ended up in the compost at best, the landfill at worst. If you don't know this, 40% of all food that is grown in the world is thrown out. It is the 3rd largest contributor to greenhouse gas in the world, but we don't talk about it. We bought those tomatoes, we processed them, we made pizza sauce. How hard is that? Pretty easy. We sold that to the Springfield Public Schools. So we took surplus that would have ended up in the landfill. Now it's creating jobs. We're getting food out into a low-income public school. We're solving a problem. The only reason we can do that is because we had the infrastructure. We had the infrastructure because we were trying to solve a problem for our small businesses. But that model has created this incredible leverage, that domino effect that we didn't understand would happen. And so what you see happening when I see what Sarah's doing here in Connecticut and what Amy's trying to do in Hartford and other places, I think this is where the new opportunity of what a new food economy can look like, is that all of these small pieces, when you put them together, bring something that is much bigger and much more tangible to what we all see and why we're all here.
And sorry, can I add one thing? Just to make sure that this point is super clear, without the physical infrastructure that Commonwealth Kitchen is able to provide, we are asking farmers and the institutional buyers like MIT to forge these one-to-one relationships that don't work for either. And so it's like that physical infrastructure that you were able to provide in that amazing example is the thing that facilitates the scaling of that relationship in a way that both supports the institution buying local, which we know they want to do, and also supports the farmers being able to supply that produce.
Yeah, that's right. And Sarah, this is kind of where you guys are headed. Where
Yeah.
are you guys at in that?
Yeah, so I was going to.
You're crazy.
We are crazy. We definitely are. I think leaning into all of our partnerships and our local ecosystem is really important. Jen mentioned that. I think we're all doing that in different ways, learning from our partners that are farther along than we are around the country, especially in the region, and also thinking about ourselves regionally, since we have people from New Haven using co-packers in Massachusetts. So really, it's not that far away. We also use our farmers markets a lot. So a lot of our ventures, that's where they test their products. That's where they start out. So and for every venture that is a good fit for the farmers market, which is not every one, we try to give them that opportunity. Even if they can't be like a regular vendor for whatever reason, we let them do a guest spot or something. So we really try to use that. We also try to lean into local sourcing as an area for the business to develop. We have all these farmer relationships, and we actually have some funding now, federal funding, which hopefully we will continue to have, to forge those partnerships between our local entrepreneurs and our farmers, and to do some of the facilitation of matching and providing local produce. And then within our new building, really the question is, can we provide that missing middle? So that's what we're beginning a process now, really evaluating that, because we know that many of our ventures will get to a certain point, get a big order, and not have the capital to be able to use one of the existing co-packers to fulfill it. So we'd like to do that. Whether it's feasible is an open question, but that's something that we know there's a need, and we'd like to be able to do it if we can.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open it up. So let's see. Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask each of you to talk about the role of the state, our state, local, federal resources in providing infrastructure for food businesses, and whether you identified any major gaps and any areas of potential for improvement. Caitlin, if you want to kick us off.
I'm sure. I think of the four of us, I'm probably the least qualified to answer that question. But I'll just quickly say that, at this point, everyone will know what I'm going to say, but I think that investing in physical infrastructure, in the adaptive reuse of historic buildings, and thinking creatively about the way that we most resourcefully repurpose the infrastructure that we already have is a gap in investment, and something that is going to take really creative partnerships between public sector funding and private sector funding to solve.
So the more I do this work, the more I believe that the infrastructure that we are providing is essential critical infrastructure, and it should be funded by the government, and it's not. I think that when you look at what's happening in the consolidation of the food industry more broadly, you look at what happened during COVID and all of the ways that workers are being harmed, humans are being harmed because the system is not set up to care about humans and food and our climate and our economy, that we need a different way. And the economics don't pencil. And so therefore, for me, when I look at this, I think, it's anathema to what's happening in our federal government right now, but to me, the government needs to be part of the solution. We are feeding public school kids. We are feeding community college kids. We are feeding in hospitals. Like, this is what is the purpose. And so for me, that's where I lean in, frankly, because I don't see where the economic engine is for this. And I will tell you that anybody who's really geeky interested in this, there's some national group, the Council for Development Finance Agencies, is doing a whole look at the question of asset class and where food should be considered an asset class. And so therefore, how do you underwrite it? When Danny was talking about the 1 million and the 3X and the 10X, I'm like, oh my God, like that is a handful of, none of our businesses are ever going to be in that situation. They don't actually want to sell. They want to be able to build a story and tell and feed their families and support their community and share the food culture that they have. They're not trying to do that. And so there is this miss in what we're trying to do in the way that we value food. And so I think there's a broader conversation to be had about this of what's the true cost of food? What is the true value of food? And until we change that narrative, we continue to stay in this place where we're just trying to figure out how to make nickels move. And then the people who are most hurt in this are first the farmers and the land, and then our small businesses, and who's making all the money. It's the big corporations that are consolidating in all the places that is where we're just stuck. And that's where I feel like looking at this in a very different kind of a definition is what's going to be needed.
Yeah, I was thinking as Jen was talking that we did start to move in a better direction with our public partners because of the availability of ARPA dollars and ESSER dollars and all this. So there were more grants for businesses, Black and brown businesses. There were better loan terms. Some of this stuff started to shift, and I think now that a lot of that money is sunsetting and now we have this disaster federally, it all seems to be rolling back, like one after another, and it's very worrisome. I will say in Connecticut, we have great partnerships. Our building was purchased with state dollars. Overall, I think it's very collaborative and supportive. Of course, we'd like to be seen as just part of the public infrastructure and not this kind of one-off with funding here and there. One of the things that the food hubs and incubation centers and sort of related organizations in the state have been talking about is collaborating more effectively and in a more coordinated way, and thinking about how we sort of push the state to have more consistent funding for all of the organizations doing this work in different regions with more sort of ownership by region and stuff like that. So we're starting to have that conversation more than has happened in the past. It probably should have happened, 5 years ago when there was more money, but we're doing it now, and I think that has potential to have impact going forward.
So we also receive funding from the state and federal funding as well for a variety of our different programs. What I think one of the biggest challenges, it's probably easier for us sitting up here to know what's available because we're constantly asking, meeting people, trying to find something for that entrepreneur that's at our door, trying to look for support. But I think about the person that's just trying to do it and how challenging it is, especially as a solo entrepreneur. You're doing it for your first time, or maybe you're running a restaurant or a food truck in addition to wanting to launch a sauce or something else. It is very lonely, and I think we can do a lot more about aggregating all of the information, all of the resources in one place. I'm going to go back to what I said before about defining success and understanding what that means to you. Jen's point a few minutes ago, it's not everybody wants to make a multi-billion dollar company that's going to get sold or that's sold internationally. You need to ask yourself what you define success as and not measure your success against what you're seeing from other companies. And it is okay to be local and to think about mission first and supporting your local economy. We need more co-packing space. We need workforce development, being from a university, thinking about how we're providing support in hospitality, food and beverage, and spaces that maybe UConn or Yale or other universities maybe don't spend a lot of time in. How do we provide that ongoing support?
Great. So much to process, so much to think about here. Let's turn it over to the audience for any questions. Thinking it over. Oh, we got one. Hi.
Hello, I'm Catrice Claudio. I work with Reset. We're another entrepreneurial support organization in the Hartford area. We recently merged with Collab, which is a New Haven-based organization. Also work in close partnership with folks like CitySeed, so we're so happy to be part of this. My question is more of a question and a statement. So what I understand about these small food businesses specifically, and most businesses in the early stage, is they're getting all the information and the mentorship, right? But they're not getting the access to the capital, and they're not getting access to the infrastructure needed to act independently on their businesses. So as someone who is creating spaces to create production capacity, to create distribution capacity, In what ways are we innovating or imagining ways to actually launch these businesses so they can advocate on behalf of themselves as entrepreneurs with direct distributors and co-packers? And then additionally, you know, with someone like Commonwealth Kitchen, I'm sure you have a crazy demand because there is this middle stage business that is looking for that support. What are your minimums looking like? What are the numbers that are involved in working with a resource like yours so that we can figure out a way to get inspiration and build that out here? Because Caitlin, I'm happy you exist. The greater Hartford area has ZIP. And people are going to Providence, Boston, New York. I spoke to someone who's going as far as Texas to get their stuff manufactured. So what is it that, are we forward thinking enough to help our individual entrepreneurs act on their own behalf so they can scale without the barrier of like using a nonprofit space as a crutch more or less, or as like a step, and more like a stepping stone?
So first of all, I appreciate the question. And I would say to you, I don't see it as a crutch. I see it as this is like, we're lowering the barrier. We're doing the stuff that needs to be done. And so that feels like the right thing for us. So I'm proud of the fact that we're filling these gaps. And really, for us, we really try to think about this as how are we empowering our businesses with what they need? Mm-hmm. So when we build strategic partnerships, for example, part of our work is how do we transfer that relationship to our business owners? And so how is it, we have a business owner who has a very good relationship now with the New England Patriots. She does events for them all the time. That started because we had the relationship and then we handed it to her. Now I have nothing to do with it. And I'm always like, wait, what just happened? Oh, that's amazing. Because that's what should happen. And you know what? That's what systems change is, because the business is now changing how their behavior, how they're working the behavior. We took over the Student Center food court at MIT. We put 3 immigrant-owned businesses in there. Big, long negotiation with MIT of how we did it. A lot of arm wrestling to make it happen. For it to work for them, for it to work for us, and to work for our businesses. We're not in the middle anymore because the businesses are doing it. Again, making MIT change how they are behaving was what's important in that model. So key is, I'm totally with you, like how do you actually create this economic opportunity and meaningful? But for me, part of that is ecosystems, peer mentoring, transferring of those relationships, because we know that networks are where people are going to build resilience. And we know that, as I said earlier, where you start with your business is not likely going to be what you're going to be doing in a year or two later. And so how do you build relationships and networks? And this is also sort of the legacy of what gentrification has done in communities of color and lots of other things that say we have to build ways for people to connect with each other. Very simple. For the minimums for what we do, generally speaking, it's a day's worth of production for us, or does it make sense to do it? So in a day, if we're doing like sauces or something like that, it's a minimum of about 400 gallons is what we're doing. Products, it depends on the product in terms of the scale of what it is. And from the access to capital, no question, it's a major problem. And I fight with the CDFIs all the time. I know that's a surprise to all of you that I would be fighting with people, but, because they don't want to work with our businesses, despite all the things that they have about supposedly working with undercapitalized, underserved, right? Under no collateral, all of the things they see the food industry as too risky, and therefore they still won't do it. So we actually are working right now with our state finance agency on developing a new model to try to at least start to solve the early stage on capital access in a revolving loan program. Generally speaking, we are their lender. So we have our businesses on terms. That is not the right answer long term, but is the answer for now.
And just to extend that, Caitlin, I'm wondering how you're imagining bridging that gap.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm going to come talk to you about Hartford as soon as we're done, because I am absolutely hell-bent on getting something going in Hartford and have been looking at buildings in the North End with some community partners for the last few months. So I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Just to add to that, we're launching the Yukon Food Innovation Center in Hartford. So while that's not necessarily going to be a space to resolve some of the challenges, I think it's a good starting point. And we talk about like co-packers and manufacturers. They all have, there are restrictions on their physical infrastructure, the tooling, the way that they can produce food. So you are sometimes restricted to what they have available and what they have access to. And also, if you're using fresh ingredients, where are those fresh ingredients coming from? We're in Connecticut. We don't necessarily get that in February. So there are a little bit of, thinking outside of the box and providing support in the innovation space to get them from their kitchen at home to the next scale to prove viability. But I think there's a little bit in that area that we need to continue to work on for sure. And
Can I just very quickly for you is to say one place where innovation would be enormously helpful is in the actual manufacturing equipment.
100%.
I was just going to say.
The equipment,
so old school.
it's everything is $100,000 or more, and it's one thing to fill something chunky, different if it's smooth, different if it's vertical, different if it's horizontal, and they're all expensive.
Yeah.
So if somebody were to start to fix that,
I was just going to say the same. I mean, I know I'm biased, but that to me sounds like a design challenge and a design opportunity. And right now we're asking equipment manufacturers that have built their, processing equipment models around an industrial scale to do something that it wasn't designed to do. And so that is something that we as industrial designers and architects and people who think about space are well equipped to try to help solve.
I mean, a lot of people probably know this, but Connecticut is, has a large tool maker industry. So that connection seems like a natural one. Sarah, did you?
I was just going to add, one thing that we've started doing is trying to leverage the relationships that we have, kind of the transferring of power that Jen was talking about. So we get a lot of people reaching out to us to say, we want some interesting food for our party or for our whatever. Or we want, like different lunch options, like pop-ups and stuff. So we've been trying to organize those so that it's not such a heavy lift for the partner initially, and they can get exposure to our ventures and then hand it off so that it can continue directly, but not with us as the intermediary. So we're doing that with a couple of different organizations now and want to do more.
We could, one more question and then we'll get on to the pitch competition, but sir.
Actually, to kind of add on to what you were saying with the design challenge. So I'm Matt Browning, We Charcuterie Salami, started in New Haven. We're in a bunch of stores and stuff now. So we're kind of getting close to that. How do we get to the next level stage? But we've been looking at and talked to even Connecticut about, there's some grants and loans to be able to help with manufacturing equipment. And it's all, like you say, $100,000. But another real challenge for us, because of we're small in our manufacturing facility, is the footprint that these things take, and and the tech that's required to run. We're looking to get better packaging, so I'm going to talk to you about co-packing. But you can't get like a vacuum table that'll fold down from the wall and then fold away when you don't need it, because we're all stepping over each other trying to make things happen. And if we added 2 or 3 machines, there's nowhere for anyone to work. It's amazing. Like you said, it's designed for industrial scale. Everything is designed for that industrial scale. So I don't know who or how and how you facilitate like the design challenge idea with the universities and the engineers. That stuff, there's got to be a mid-size way to be able to co-pack our things. And it does. I haven't found it. It may exist somewhere, but I've never found it.
Well, I do have one good specific example that is not directly relevant to you, but I'm working on designing a chestnut processing facility, and there is no middle scale chestnut processing industry to speak of in the United States. There's one sort of regional scale processor in Ohio, but Italy and the Mediterranean is where there is a real thriving regional chestnut industry. And so we've been working closely with the equipment manufacturers in Italy to figure out how to right size the equipment for 1 million pounds of throughput per year. That represents, what a thriving chestnut industry would look like in the Northeast. And that's a process that we're going to have to go through sort of industry by industry as we are, as you said, right sizing our industrial processing lines. It's an interesting challenge.
Can I just challenge you that when you do this? So Weiler's, people see Weiler's, the blueberries, it's the Maine processing facility. They have a beautiful giant IQF facility in Maine. They use it 6 weeks of the year. That's it.
Yeah.
They're just starting to do frozen broccoli. They've just started doing it. So I would just say to you, make sure that plant can do something else besides chestnuts, or else you got to figure out how to do chestnuts all year round. Like, these are those things where we get stuck. And we're not thinking holistically and systematically. We have to be thinking systems change.
Yeah, it's an important point.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to all the panelists. Let's have a round of applause and let's get to the pitch competition.